Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Degrees of Debt rally. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thanks to the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay for hosting this event. I'm Noelle Dickman. I'm a journalist for USA Today Network Wisconsin, and I cover education. And also, coincidentally, I'm still paying for my own college education. This event is being carried live on the greenbaypressgazette.com and across the USA Today Network Wisconsin. It'll be available for replays if you want to catch it again. So we also want to acknowledge that the Wisconsin National Guard is underwriting the Degrees of Debt series. A representative from the Guard is available to answer questions about their tuition assistance programs outside. Degrees of Debt is designed to do three things. The first is to let our readers know that student debt is a serious thing. Later this year, we'll explore how candidates for office say they'll address student debt and college affordability. Next year, we'll be writing about ways that students and families can make smart decisions about higher education. Is my audio okay? Is it a little fuzzy here? Hear me okay? Okay. So there's more than $1.3 trillion of student debt in our country. The federal government owns or backs more than 90% of the debt, but many have fallen behind on their payments. This next slide shows where Wisconsin ranks in percentage of students graduating with debt. There we go. On average, it's about $29,000. Now, I've been sharing my own number on videos in the series that you might have seen, and my student debt number is $45,000 after graduating from UW-Oshkosh, and I had one other semester at another college. But I didn't share my experience as a debt overachiever to impress anybody. I did it to foster a conversation around the second aim of our series, which is to provide information to students and families. There are many factors behind the increase in student debt. One of them is the amount of state financial support per student is declining. This is happening in Wisconsin and across the country. And as you can see from these two slides, state support hasn't kept up with tuition increases. From 2009 to 2015, tuition increased 17%, but state funding per student fell by 15%. UW system graduates are also finding it harder to keep up with loan payments. About 1 in 20 default, which means they miss payments for at least 9 months. Default rates are even higher for Wisconsin Technical College students. High levels of student debt are making it harder for young people to buy homes, go on vacations, and leave their parents' basements. But here at UW Green Bay, you can proudly celebrate being below average. You have a few dollars of unmet financial needs and lower averages of student debt. Go UW Green Bay. So in addition to our 4 campus rallies that we're having this fall, early next year we'll also be holding a series of college info nights that are aimed to help middle school and high school families and students make smart decisions about their own higher education. Details on these events are coming soon. Now the final goal of Degrees of Debt is why we're here tonight. We've been asked why we're describing these events as rallies instead of a meeting, forum, or town hall. So not to get too grammatical on you all, but we're using the word rally as a verb, not a noun. We want to bring energy and a sense of urgency to the discussion. So, what's our common purpose and our common cause to rally around? We want to talk solutions to make college more affordable and to make college more accessible. To that end, we've invited some very smart people up on stage here to share their knowledge, experience, and ideas. We're going to start with some questions with our panel, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. We're joined by Scott Furlong, who is the Dean of College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences here at UW Green Bay. Vanya Kepke, a 2015 graduate and sales account representative for Schneider National, who is active in the Green Bay Young Professionals Group. Oh, oops. Backwards there. We have Darnisha Miller, a sophomore at UW Green Bay who's involved in the Black Student Union, Student Government Affairs, and who works on campus as an ambassador. And then we also have Dylan Tritt, who is a senior at UW Green Bay and who's also vice president of the Student Government Association. So let's start with a question for Vanya. Vanya, you've been out in the real world for a few months now. What did you say, 14 months before has it been?
Yeah, about.
Okay, so what advice would you have for students as they're trying to figure out how to fit paying for college into everything else that they have going on?
Absolutely. Well, there are a few things to consider. I think the first one is when you're making plans to come out of high school and pursue a college degree, you want to be proactive in talking with your guidance counselor or even that college advisor about the available scholarships out there. I've seen it too often where students are told there's a scholarship that they can apply for, but they don't know where to find it. They miss the application deadline, or they simply are not aware of it. So that would be the first thing, just making sure you pursue the grants and the scholarships that are available. Second thing that I hear quite often is FAFSA. FAFSA is very useful for students because it's free to apply for. The government provides you with that loan. But at the same time, you want to be careful. You don't want to take it as a credit card and max it out, because quite often students are given all these options of subsidized, unsubsidized loans, and they say, wow, this is great. And unfortunately, I've seen too often where they've used that money for things outside of school, which, fair to them, there might be that need. But at the same time, you want to make that an immediate thing instead of something that's down the road. So if you think of that debt as immediate and having to battle with it down the road, it'll make you much more aware of the cost. And then the third thing I have to say is working hard. I think it should be noted there are thousands of students across the U.S. who are working 2, 3 jobs to make sure their costs are met. But at the same time, I think it's important to not only say, well, if I have this job, I should be set. You got to be also thinking of $5 or $10 that you can be putting into paying off your loans while you're in school. So just making that at the forefront of where you are. So don't push it off down the road. Work hard. When I was at W Green Bay, I had 3 on-campus jobs. Shout out to the video guys. One of my jobs my junior year was recording all the basketball and the volleyball games at the Crest Event Center, at the Rush Center. And quite a few of you in this room I see are working really hard to pay off those loans and to get ahead of your finances.
Awesome. That's a really good point about using financial aid for school. I remember being in college and having students say, and I guess I was probably guilty of it too, you get your financial aid and you're like, I have money, and then you go buy your groceries and you buy, and then, so good point on that one. One more question for you. With your friends and your fellow young professionals, how much of an issue is student debt to you guys now?
Yeah, I actually took the time over the last few weeks and discussed it with some of the chamber members, some of the current young professionals, and a lot of these are entrepreneurs, a lot of young business owners. So it's that much harder to invest into your business, into various endeavors when you have that $30,000 or $60,000 weighing over you. So I've seen that be a real issue. I've seen some young professionals say they're not able to go and have those events or those outings with certain co-workers of theirs because they can't afford it. So you have people going on business advancement and certain trips where they learn more about their profession, but some of them simply can't afford because they are paying for those student loans.
Okay. Now we have a question for Scott. Scott, many of the numbers that we've been sharing are state and national averages for all colleges and universities. However, what's distinct about UW Green Bay and the issues that face its student body here?
Well, we pride ourselves at UW Green Bay that we serve an awful lot of what we often call first-generation students, which are basically students whose parents have not gone to school, and oftentimes those students don't have a lot of role models for how to transition to college, and I would argue don't have a lot of information regarding a lot of the stuff that Vanya talked about earlier, filling out a FAFSA. I mean, I've got a PhD, my wife's got a PhD. We had a hard time filling out the FAFSA sometimes, and when you don't have that background, that information to rely on as a first generation student, I think the potential is really there for getting into some trouble with debt. By the same token, what I have found with our students, and again, Vanya has mentioned this already, that they are working a lot of jobs and they are working a lot of hours in order to keep their debt at a very low level. And you mentioned that we are one of the lowest in the UW system, and they don't like debt, and that's great. But there's a trade-off there. If you're working 30, 40 hours a week and trying to maintain a full load of classes, something may suffer, whether it's the classroom or the job or your sanity in life. Something is gonna have be affected by those types of issues.
So you have the benefit of not only being a college administrator, but you're also someone who studies public policy and discourse. So what's your sense of how much the public actually understands the issues surrounding college affordability and its accessibility?
I don't think, from a general public perspective, it's fully understood. They hear big numbers like 1.3 trillion and don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here. We as voters, as policymakers, have choices to make. We have priorities that we have to think about, and some of the issues that you had up on your screen before in terms of decreasing support from state governments, as an example, and is a choice. It's a priority that many states, almost every state in the nation, has made over the last 20 or 30 years. When I arrived here at Green Bay a little over 20 years ago, the state contribution was over 50%, and now it's 17% for UW Green Bay. So it's a pretty significant decrease. There's also, I think, a lot of, we talk about these numbers, why so much debt? A lot of it's being driven by student demand. A lot more students going to school now than there used to be, and I don't think everybody realizes that. A lot of the debt we're talking about is held by students who frankly were going to some of the for-profit schools. And I know you recently did one of your stories on that in the USA Today, and a lot of the students are not graduating. I think what we find a lot of times is that the students who are not graduating are the ones who are really suffering the most in the area of student debt, and that's something to think about. And then the other thing that's been very interesting, if you look at it a little bit more detail, one of the big stakeholders here are the banks and the loaners. And for the students who are out there, you're a great investment. I mean, you pay back your loans. I think our UWGB students pay back at something like start paying back at about 90%. You're a good investment when everything else seems to be bottoming out. Home mortgages, the .com, everything else, and the students are paying. So they're more than willing to lend the money. So when we talk about whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized student loans, taking out additional private loans on top of that, banks are willing to give those dollars out, give those loans out, and have students take advantage of that, and that drives that debt up as well. So I think the nuances of the debt issues are things that really need to be a little better explained and understood.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, so we're also very pleased to be joined by two UW Green Bay students. Thank you for being here. One perspective that's often missing from this conversation is students. So, Dylan, your turn. As student government leader, how do you see the university system meeting the challenge of helping students who need assistance paying for college?
Well, I think before we address that question, I think we need to figure out why students are going into debt in the first place. And he touched on this a little earlier. Why is college so expensive? So basically how colleges get their funding is this combination between tuition and state appropriations. The UW system's goal has been about 35% tuition, 65% state appropriations. And they were hitting these marks in the 95-96 year and the 2000-2001 year when it was 33% tuition, 67% based on state appropriations. This year, it's completely flipped. We're up to 58% based on tuition, 42% state appropriations. So now if we break it down a little bit further, according to the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau, $790 million have been cut from state appropriations just since 2011. That's quite a bit of money. Adjusted for inflation, that's the least amount of money the UW system has ever spent on students. And these cuts are directly linked into the raise of tuition. Now we have this thing called the tuition freeze, which has been implemented by Governor Walker, which is nice for students because it doesn't raise tuition. But this also can harm us in many ways because of the cuts in state appropriations. So it's like a scale. The scale is shifted to we're mostly tuition, but now the state appropriations are going down, but tuition can't go up. So schools are losing revenue. Though they can't charge us more money for tuition, we're losing revenue. So we've lost $840 million of state appropriations, or excuse me, of total revenue just because of the tuition freeze. Governor Walker wants to put in another 2 years of this tuition freeze, which is going to cost this system even more money. So what does this do? It hinders the ability to attract and retain high-quality faculty. It presents difficulties in offering courses and programs, loss of support services, and lack of repairs to upgrades, or lack of repairs and upgrades to infrastructure, which hurts our education. So how can this problem be fixed? Increase state appropriations. I think the university system needs to fight for an increase in state appropriations in order to keep the costs down for students without hurting our education.
Thank you. That was very informative. Okay, Darnisha, your turn. Can you describe what your experience has been like paying for college, and what advice do you have for students who might find themselves in a similar situation to yourself?
Right. So fortunately, I've been very lucky. I'm actually free of debt right now. So I currently am on a scholarship. So it pays for my tuition, but not my housing and dining plans. So I just have to work enough. During the summer, I work a lot to cover that part of my tuition that I have to pay for. I took summer classes too this year, and they were very expensive. About $1,800 I spent on 3 summer courses, and ended up dropping one. So it was very expensive, but I didn't take out a loan. I covered it by pocket. But I guess my advice to anybody who wants to be debt-free is to really apply for scholarships. Work as much as you can over the summer, because it really can help you get that covered. I mean, I know exactly how much I need to earn to pay off so I don't have any debts. So.
Yeah. All right. Good point about the scholarships. We actually spoke to a student, I believe at UWO last week, who had mentioned that she was on a scholarship website and she could look up how many people had applied for it. And for tons of these scholarships, there was only like 1 applicant. And I mean, they have qualifications for them, but I mean, that just speaks to your point that get those scholarships because they're out there and they want to give people money. All right, so now we're going to take some audience questions. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand, and Jim or Pete, who are standing in the aisles, will let you know when it's your turn. There's a couple of ground rules here. Please be civil, please be succinct, and please be solutions-oriented. It's fine if you have a question for the panel, or if you want to make an observation or just a statement, but be kind. Nobody in this room is responsible for student debt, but with a common purpose and working together, we can make a constructive change. So my colleague, Roy Linane, is at the mic.
Thanks, Noel. Excuse me. So before we start taking questions, we want to show you a video that we did. We did some interviews with students here on campus, and here comes the video.
Do you have to make sacrifices to be able to go to school?
Definitely. I worked all summer, this summer and last summer, and have really had to work with my parents, applying for loans and FAFSA and stuff like that.
Yes, definitely a lot of sacrifices. Over the summer, I was kind of trying to look at taking another classes. However, they're actually about $800 per class to take over the summer rather than taking over the fall. So the opportunity to graduate early was kind of nixed out just because of the expenses. And then again, over the summer, I work a lot. So I usually carry about 2 jobs, max out at about 65 hours a week, so that I can afford my car and my groceries and my on-campus apartment and, of course, tuition.
I was at St. Norbert's last year, and that was a little pricey for me. So that was kind of part of my decision to come to GB. But in the long run, I think that's going to work out well. So, I mean, I guess that'd be a sacrifice, I guess.
I guess with focusing on grades, I guess not having a job for a little bit, I definitely do like having an income, a regular income, so probably not working and focusing on school.
Not so much in the way of giving things up, I probably had to budget myself a little bit more, whereas I was a little more carefree with spending a while back. But I think now I'm starting to look more for stuff that's on sale as far as like groceries and whatnot.
I don't buy food from here. I make my own food and then pack it. And I also ride my bike to work now, sit on my car.
My summer.
Okay, can you elaborate?
I had to work 40 hours a week this past summer and like the summer before to try to rack up all this money to pay for this, and it's still like not enough, so it's like stressful.
So UW Green Bay, we're going to be back here on Tuesday, October 4th at 7 p.m. at the Christie Theater. We're going to be talking about our Degrees of Debt series and solutions to college debt. And there's going to be free pizza, note that. So hope you can join us that day.
Okay, so we already have our first question here from the audience from Lonnie.
Dylan, you asked the question of, or made the comment that the state should have more appropriations. That's how we would get this balance back to the 33, 66%, like 1/3, would be yours, and the state would pay for 2/3. That's been, you said, totally flip-flopped. The problem is that as a taxpayer, and all the taxpayers here, we're still facing budget shortfalls. Wisconsin is one of the highest state income taxpayers in the nation. How are you going to get more money from the taxpayers? They don't have the means to pay for it. So that's one, you'd say to have the state appropriate more money is a great idea. Sounds good on paper. But how do you get taxpayers to buy into that? I don't think people here want to do that. I'd much rather have a road. I'd much rather have high schools, better high schools. But colleges, to me, is something that I don't think young people look at and say, when I need a job, I need to have an education to get a job. When they get their education, how many look at what's going to be out there when I get my education, when I get my degree? Is that job going to be there? We're told right now that you say make college more affordable, make it accessible. That's great, except for one thing. Where are the jobs for these people? And are they going to have that job for 15 years while they pay off their debt? Those are questions that need to be answered, and I don't see those answers coming forward. So my biggest question to you, though, going back, is how are we going to get more appropriations when right now Wisconsin's one of the highest taxed states in the nation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. UW system is public schools, which in my mind and in the minds of others should be either free for students or, a small fee. Sort of like high school is free. Public high schools are free. Everybody benefits from a well-educated group of citizens, whether it's you, me. I don't pay much taxes yet because I don't work that much. I don't have time to work, but you pay taxes, and you're going to benefit from me and her and all these people being educated. Saying that you don't want to put more money to that kind of tells me that you don't feel educated citizens are a priority. And the state cutting money kind of tells me that education is not a priority in the state. So, if you want to fork over the money to have it's give and take. If you want to have well-educated citizens, send them to college, make it affordable, make it easy for people to have access to education.
I think another part of his question was, are there jobs out there that are requiring college education? And, do you think our economy overall will be better off if we have more people going out into the workforce who have college educations?
Could you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah. So I think he was asking, how necessary is a college education to our economy now? Are people who are getting a college education having better chances of going out and being productive in the economy?
Well, of course, there's jobs out there that don't require a college education. But there are jobs out there that do require a college education. It all depends on what type of occupation you're looking for. A couple of my family members are doing just fine without a college education. But that's not the path I chose to take. The path I want to take requires a college education. And I've done my research. I know the job market's there. So I'm going to get a college education for it. And I know I'm going to be able to land a job. So, it all depends on the career path you'd like to take.
And we found in our own reporting too that, state reports have found that an increasing number of job opportunities are going to be requiring college education more than we have currently in our population. Did you want to ask?
Yeah, as an education reporter, so often I hear teachers and educators saying, we don't even know half the jobs that are going to be out there. So kids who are in high school now, they might be in a job right now that doesn't even exist. So, I mean, what about them? The other thing I wanted to add was, I think part of our solution is these career services. I'm not sure if you have career services here in Green Bay, I assume so. But at UW Oshkosh, that was super helpful to me to get in touch with the career services department and have them help you look. So I think maybe, beefing up those career services departments, maybe that's something that could help.
All right, thanks everyone. This is a question specifically for Scott. Do you see a difference in student preparedness or the amount of debt they carry if before coming here they attend a technical or community college for some of their general education requirements?
We've actually looked at that, and there is not much difference in terms of preparedness for the students who are coming from, the two-year Wisconsin schools or University of Wisconsin schools. There are direct comparisons with our own first 2 years here, and we've done research on some of the students who come here from technical colleges, and generally there's not a big difference. I think there probably are in certain areas, certain classes, but in a general way, there's not much of a difference. I mean, what you're really talking about is differences of experience in those areas, and probably the level of the instructors who might be teaching those general education courses at a university versus at a technical college.
Okay, so you're saying as far as their preparedness for college, there's not much of a difference?
Not in terms of their grades in the upper level, if I can use that as a comparison. They seem to come in and do fine. Okay.
Student debt-wise, do you see them having less of a burden?
Well, they ought to have less student debt because the technical colleges are cheaper, and the two-year UWs are a little bit cheaper as well. So I would expect, again, I don't have that data in front of me, but I would expect that they would be having lower debt. The other issue is that those institutions generally are not residential institutions, so the types of expenses that Ernisha was talking about earlier are not part of their finances that they have to worry about. Most of those students are living at home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. So another question from the audience. How can parents provide guidance or help to college students who are swimming in debt after they graduate? Are there places they can go for help and guidance on that? Vanya, I don't know if you've been able to find any help with that since you've graduated.
Well, I think I was just talking to Wayne right before this, and he mentioned that a few individuals have come up to him and they aren't even sure where the financial aid office is. So I think number one is if you have loans and you need financial assistance, you definitely want to locate the resources that you're paying for. So career services, FAFSA, and the loan programs that are out there, you want to reach out to those resources and make sure you're getting help on that. For me, I took the two-year path, the two-year university first, so I was able to save a good chunk of money, and then went to UW Green Bay for 2 years. And what that helped with was not having those expenses of room and board. So I've been very fortunate to be in a position to start paying off 100% of my loans right away and not having to default or do every other month payments. So I understand that not everybody's in that position, but I think it's important to note that, yes, education is a public good and it benefits the society, absolutely. But we should not have the attitude that we are owed something. We should have the attitude of wanting to work for something and being responsible with how we take out loans, being responsible with what we spend our money on. In college, you have a lot of disciplines, and I think college is definitely something that you're going to be disciplined in your education, but you also want to be disciplined and you want to work really hard and be wise in how you manage your finances, because it's not owed to us. If you want to be in that job market that's paying $15,000, $20,000 more per degree, then we have to roll up our sleeves and get it done. So, state assistance, absolutely important. I hope, there'll be some more of that. But we have to have that mentality and the attitude of hard work and self-sacrifice. Maybe even taking a year off after high school, maybe going to a 2-year university first. It's going to be what you want to make of it. You know, I graduated with $17,000 of debt. It's very manageable for me. I have a few friends who are here who, whether here or at other colleges, who are at 60, 80, somebody's at $100,000 in loans. Friends, that's not okay for a bachelor's degree. I mean, that's to Dylan's point. Education is a public good, and I think we should invest into it. But we have to be wise in how we pursue our degree.
Thanks. And Scott, can you comment on any kind of resources the university provides to students after graduation?
After graduation? Well, I think our students and alumni are always welcome to use career services after graduation. There are not really any, I guess what I would call financial resources that the university would necessarily be implementing. I don't think. I'm looking at Jim Rohan out there in the audience somewhere to see if there's anything. I don't think there is. You know, the other thing is really some changes in policy, I guess. So much of what we talk about in terms of debt and paying back debt is we have a process that has sort of been in place for a long time. You go and you get, let's say, 20,000 loans, and you sort of divide that up on a monthly basis over a set of years. Some of the policy ideas that are out there, and some states have already implemented, is tying those repayments to actual income, so that those students who are fortunate to, come out with a higher paying job, they can afford to pay a little bit more back at once. But the students who are in lower paying jobs, or the job, frankly, teachers don't make a whole lot of money entering the job. It's an extremely important profession. We can tie those repayments over a longer period of time and tie it to the percentage. Those take some policy changes to our student loan process.
All right, thanks. And next we have Sandy Duckett here from a local organization who wants to speak about that.
Thank you, and thank you for having these sessions. I'm Sandy Duckett. I'm with an organization called We Are Hope Inc. We oversee one of Wisconsin's job centers, and we have a program called Be Smart About Education. I have some handouts for you that I think would be very informational. One of the things that is really driving up the student debt is a change in public policy in 2010. Student debt was overhauled by our federal government, and it's part of the health care bill. So I have some charts from the Federal Reserve that will show you the significant increase. You'll see from the first chart the significant rise in student debt in 2010. And that has also escalated with some of the additional public policy changes that had occurred. That also drives up the healthcare cost, and what impact that has had is also on our labor force, because many employers today now hire 32 hours so they don't have to pay the benefits. It also increased the federal debt. You can see that we're printing more money today, and the participation of labor is differently. We at the Job Center have lists of careers in high demand, and there are also programs available that can provide funding to help finance your education. I worked for a higher education institution for 11 years. I turned down a college presidency. I know how education works. Yes, there have been some cutbacks, but we have to look at doing education differently. And we have started roundtable discussions around the state to get input from both educators and employers and individuals to talk about how we can better align you for careers in demand and how we can help control these costs. Because public policy does have an influence on the things that we do.
All right, thank you. Did anyone want to respond to any of that?
I would need to look at this a little bit more
Yeah, sure.
to respond. I agree. Public policy, as a public policy analyst, does affect what's going on, and that is for sure. But I really would want to look at some of these charts a little bit more detail before commenting on.
Yeah. Okay.
If anybody wants a copy in our audience, I have a couple extras up here. If you'd like one, come up and I'll give you one.
Okay. Thank you. So what's come up a lot throughout our reporting is how difficult it can be to refinance loans and students getting stuck with some pretty tough interest rates. So someone from the audience asked if there are any banks that are helpful in refinancing loans. So if any of you have had an experience with refinancing, if you could speak to that, or any ideas about that.
Well, my experience is so old that it's probably not relevant anymore. So I have nothing to say on that one.
Okay, no problem. So another thing that's come up is the need for financial literacy. I know a lot of students don't even know how much debt they're in, and don't really understand what that will mean for their future. Do you all think there's more that could be done for high school students or for college students to really help them understand what they're getting into and how to manage their finances?
I'll let them talk about that.
So yeah, I think that's kind of back to my point earlier as far as, we have the different classes in high school that we take. I was homeschooled, so it's a little bit different. But your basic budgeting, you have your car loans, your rental, and all that comes after college. But I think we should be hitting much more on the experiences of people who do have loans and what the process of taking out a loan looks like, and educating these students sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school, instead of saying, well, every high school senior goes to college. Fill out the FAFSA, best of luck. I think some high schools in the area do take those steps to be proactive and engage the students, but I think we have to be much more realistic. I think too often we brush over it with this rosy brush that, oh, well, you'll have loans, your parents have loans, your grandparents might have loans, but I think it should be much more realistic of, okay, wait a second, in 4 years, you could be at $40,000, and if you're making $35,000 a year, how is that going to impact your rent? Do you move back to your parents? How does it impact your car maintenance or car payment? So we have to tie in a lot of the budgeting back to the college, because it really sets forth the trajectory of our budgets that go beyond rent and cars. So.
Thanks. And Scott, could you say anything about what the university does to help students understand this, or any work that you do, any reaching out you do to high schools?
I mean, there are resources within our financial aid office and around campus that will work with students at vast, but it does require a little bit of proactiveness, I think, from the student body. We do a little bit of work with our incoming freshmen and their parents, talking about issues of financial aid and applying for scholarships and the like. The university as a whole has been working really hard to develop a greater scholarship endowment as a way of reducing the amount of loans that students would have to take. So those are out there to help students. We don't do a course on financial literacy like I believe most of our high schools do in Wisconsin. But that course, even at the high school level, it's a pretty low level course, and I think a lot of students actually just read the textbook and test out of it.
Great, and we have someone here from the financial aid office.
Hi, just a couple of comments to address some of the things that have been talked about with the public policy. And I don't know exactly what was in your handout, but back in 2009, part of that public policy was the additional loans that they allowed students to borrow, an additional $2,000 on top of what they had been able to get prior to that. So as, again, more students going to college, more students with access to that student loan money. And then if you think about the timing of when we hit our economic downturn, more students were borrowing, more families were having financial difficulties. So I think all of those things added into some of this debt issue that we're having. And again, not knowing what you have on there, but, and then I wanted to address a couple other things that were mentioned. I think you'd asked about refinancing. Resources for families that have students that don't know exactly where to go or how to handle their payments if they're out of school. You still have a resource with your financial aid office, so talk to them if you don't know where to go, to who to contact, because obviously you need to get a handle on that, and the government does offer a number of repayment options that may be able to help restructuring your debt and things like that as you get out. And I guess one other thing that I'll talk about with the financial literacy information, and I think you started off the question about can we do more? I think as a whole, going back to the middle schools, the high schools, yes, we can always do more. But it is utilizing the resources that are out there. Now, we can't make students and parents, for that matter, go and look at a website, but again, to take advantage of the resources that are out there, whether it be strictly the financial aid process or beyond that, about working with the resources that are available in the community to help make these things, your payments, affordable, help you understand what options you have, so that, again, the student borrowers in Wisconsin are very good at repaying their debt. So we want, I think they realize, many of those students realize the importance of the education, realize that they can get out and can get good jobs to help repay, but just not to let those debts sit out there and not act. They have to take some active participation in not only the borrowing, like you mentioned, Vanya, but also in the repayment. Okay.
A couple quick questions for you, actually.
Mhm.
Can you identify, can you say your name and what your role is here?
Sorry. I'm Jim Rowan. I'm the financial aid director here.
Okay, and one more question for you. I guess, all that being said, where would you suggest parents and students start? Where should they go to get this information?
Well, you start with I think the students need to start preparing as early as they can with the families in high school to get information from, again, the budgeting processes, the preparing so they're ready when they get to school. All the resources that you mentioned so far, career services, start looking at the jobs that you might be interested in as students coming into college. And prepare academically for that too, so that when you do get into college, you're again, everybody is on a different path. Some will change their minds and so forth as far as their majors, but to stay active in what they want to accomplish.
Okay.
Again, it isn't you're earning it, so you have to work to earn that degree.
Yeah. So maybe something, if I'm not mistaken, all the colleges have like budget calculators on their website that parents can go and students could use. So maybe something like that might be helpful to them and
Right.
figuring out where their career is going to take them and that sort of thing.
Yes, there are net price calculators on all the university websites, but also if you're going out to visit, if your students in high school, go visit the colleges and get the specific, get the details from that institution and then work it out and look at how are my numbers as a family, how are our numbers going to fit into those costs and what's reasonable. And I think the key is it needs to be a positive experience and don't dismiss an institution because on numbers they may not add up. Have a discussion fill out the FAFSA form, and apply for scholarships and apply yourself in high school so you can do well, academically, so you can get more access to scholarships. But again, keep in touch with the aid office, and there are things you can do. Is it going to solve all the problems? No, there will still be debt, and there will always be student debt. But as individuals, one by one, students can work through, the families can work through to help minimize what that debt is.
Yeah, I think those AP classes